Well, let's map this onto entrepreneurship, because something I see for entrepreneurs is a lot of emotional volatility in their perception of whether their business is successful or not. So, as you were talking, I was just thinking exactly how this relates to the fluctuation of emotions and the perceptions when people are building businesses. And that's what makes the difference between successful entrepreneurs and unsuccessful entrepreneurs. So, will you give 3 tips to, let's say, pre-6-figure entrepreneurs who are looking to break through to 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever market is? What are 3 practical, words of wisdom, advice that you have for them in building a successful business?
Identify everything that you're doing in a day and identify what it produces per hour and prioritize that list, and then go and do the very highest priority things that produce the most income, and delegate everything else gradually to somebody else. That's one. Number two, automate the forced savings. First, the cushion account. So you have a cushion account of at least 6 months. Then force your automated investments. So there's no question, it's automated, it's going in at a fixed amount or a percentage, whichever greater. Don't ever go below the fixed amount or percentage, whichever greater. If you have a big month, put extra in. And then keep delegating and prioritizing so you can do more effective production, and keep accelerating the savings, whether you think you can do it or not. Because the worst that can happen is you got the money, you can always pay your bills with it, but just do it. Just accelerate. I did it 10% every quarter, and that meant it doubled every 2 years. And that led me to amazing transformation financially. And then have a cause that's so inspiring to you that you want to make sure you're saving and building wealth for that. And don't raise your lifestyle. If you raise your lifestyle, don't raise your lifestyle unless you raise your savings and taxes equal amounts. Automate your taxes, automate your savings and investments. And then make sure that you have inside your mind a cause that you want to go and do something with this money, something that's so meaningful that you won't want to spend it on some immediate gratifying capacity. Don't raise your lifestyle unless you raise your savings and taxes equal amounts. That was a very powerful thing. And as an entrepreneur, don't live in a fantasy that with a false attribution bias that you know what the market needs. Go and find out what the market needs so there's a demand for your services. And keep a cushion, no less than 6 months of cash on reserve. I guarantee you, you'll think you're losing money because you could be investing it, but you'll stabilize your primary business, which will make you more money than secondary businesses at first. Stabilize your business with cash reserve. The top 100 companies in the world have 50% to 100% of a year's income in saved reserves. They stabilize their business so they don't have emotions, because emotions cause volatility to business.
Mhm. This is brilliant. Yeah, I want to add this here. So stabilize your business through cash reserve. Not reserver. It's funny to type and do this at the same time. Everyone will know what I mean by that. Yeah, this is fascinating to watch real time, because I did exactly what you're saying through listening to you and reading your books. And as I was building up my wealth in both my personal account, I had a money magnet account, and then I had in my business, same thing. And then, as I started to invest in certain things, I let my money magnet account, I put it into investments, and then I watched more volatility in my money. And it's been amazing to watch and go like, oh no, stay living in the principles of always having that account because of that stability. Similarly, I tell people when they're transitioning into entrepreneurship, don't just take a leap unless you have a reserve, because your brain will go into, I just think of it as fear freak out mode. Yeah, you go into survival, and then you're too afraid and you make decisions. And in that way, will you talk a little bit? I know that you talk about, I know the way you've been talking about it is like manifesting. Let's talk about manifesting in terms of having emotional stability versus volatility. Will you talk about how that causes different ways of magnetizing money your way when you're in freak out mode versus attraction mode?
Well, anytime you're elated, proud, cocky, and think you're successful, you depurpose, because you have what is called a licensing effect, and you give yourself permission to do low priority things. And anytime you're feeling like a failure and down and everything else, you have a repurposing reflex, part of the licensing effect also, that gives you a prioritization. It says, let's go back to high priorities. So if you don't have a mission, some mission to focus on, it's easy to be swayed by the illusions of success and failure. People ask me when I get an interview a lot, oh, how did you become successful? I said, I don't consider myself successful. I find that distracting. Because the second you think you're successful, you'll tend to set too big a goal in too short a time frame. You'll tend to have a little bit more adrenaline than you need, and you'll start to take risks that are foolish. But the second you are a man on a mission or a woman on a mission and focus on your mission of service in sustainable fair exchange and not label yourself, because if you're thinking about your success, you're thinking about yourself, not your customer. That's the very important thing to make a distinction about. Now, I found out years ago, and this was a gem. I found out that when I first got married, first few years, when I would have a big day in my office and I would knock it out of the ballpark and think, wow, I'm amazing. Oh, touch me and you'll be healed or something, right? And I really was talking myself up. I noticed when I came home, she nailed me and she just popped my pimple and brought me back down into reality. And I was under the illusion that the purpose of marriage was happiness. I realized the purpose of marriage is to make sure you learn how to be authentic and to open your heart and to maintain equanimity and equity. There's a big difference, not the hedonistic pursuit of a fantasy. So when I also noticed that when I was having a really down day, she was lifting me up and saying, hey, you're not that bad of a ASS, right? Kind of thing. You're not that bad. So she was lifting me up and I was thinking, was this toxic or is this, you got a meaning to it? So I noticed that if I was stable and had just a gratitude day, she was grateful. And I was watching this dynamic going on in my relationship. So I created a little system in place. I did not leave my office until I went through a checklist. And the checklist was, if I'm feeling up and I think I did amazing today, whose names did I forget? What staff member did I not thank? What procedure did I overlook? And I calm myself down, because if you don't govern yourself, the world around you has to. That's an important. If you don't let your physiology and intuition govern you, sociology and theology will come in, which is politics and religions will be sitting there with moralities around you and controlling you. So I basically said, I calmed myself down from my highs. I lifted myself from the lows, and I didn't leave my office until I had a tear of gratitude, which was a sign of authenticity. And when I came home, I had a loving wife waiting for me. And that's gold, because I realized because the moment I realized that I was appreciating my family, I was appreciating my customer, my staff, and myself equally, and I had equity theory, my business was most stable and it grew the most. But the second I gyrated with how great I am and minimize staff or minimize staff, family, or minimize anything else, probably before the fall, and the volatilities were going up. So the addiction for pride, the addiction for fantasies, the addiction for quick riches, the addiction for being in the limelight causes volatilities. Bipolar condition is a byproduct of monopolar addiction. The second we embrace both sides simultaneously, as Wilhelm Wundt, father of experimental psychology, said, we stabilize ourselves and we maximize our potential.
Wow. Everyone must, in the future, go back and listen to what he just said. So many gems of wisdom there.